All right, welcome back. Harmless Dave here talking about real issues. In this case, it'll be Russia and Ukraine because that has taken the narrative away from the pandemic. So the pandemic officially ends on February 28th, and we are now full steam ahead, full speed ahead with the current narrative, which is talking about the war in Ukraine. Now, my take on this is different from most people. All right. I've been sampling folks from the left and the right. Some on the left and a few on the right are skeptical of what is actually happening in Ukraine. Apparently, there's been some footage that wasn't real, doctored stuff from 10 years ago, which is being used as a pretext to say that the Russians are bombing civilians intentionally, and they're doing all of this damage to infrastructure that's not just military-oriented stuff. It's hard to verify this stuff because the media in the West is so hell-bent on creating and keeping that narrative about Putin really bad. This is not justified. He shouldn't be going into Ukraine. This violates all these different things, except for the fact that, again, Russia didn't sign on to NATO. And one of the reasons I think this is happening is because everybody on the political neo side, whether you're a neocon or a neo-lib, wants Ukraine in NATO. And now even Ukraine, in a very Hail Mary kind of way, has asked to be in NATO. I think it's a bit too late for that. But you're going to hear the same echo chamber. All of the American entertainers, all of the blue check losers on Twitter who just can't get enough of this Russia. I mean, this is going to give them 10 years worth of new material. And, you know, if Trump runs again for president, they're going to hang this on his head. They're going to say, well, this is who you support, Trump. And look, Trump isn't in the Oval Office right now. So that would be my first comeback if I'm Donald Trump. Same thing happens with Tulsi Gabbard. She's going to be labeled a Russian asset if she speaks out and wants a little bit of information that's not being presented to everybody. But what this conflict really illustrates is this information gap or gulf or whatever you'd like to call it, that people can't get the entire story. Now, if you watch RT or you listen to Sputnik, and those are both Russian media sources, and full disclosure, I do enjoy watching RT because a lot of times RT will just play it down the middle. Now, during this particular conflict, they have been presenting the other side of the story. And you may say, well, see, that just proves they're pure Russian propaganda. Here's my take on that, though. Nobody else is presenting that side of the story. There are a few independent journalists, YouTubers out there who are kind of looking at this and saying, I don't think we know the full story about the Donbass region. I don't think we understand that there was kind of a civil war going on there. When you hear the term neo-Nazi, right? You know, in today's language, in today's culture, everyone's always being called a Nazi if you don't agree with them and they suggest something that might be patriotic or something that might be good for the nation. A populist now is considered a Nazi. A truck driver in Canada is also considered a Nazi. So when you hear the term and it's an actual neo-Nazi, somebody who claims that this is their heritage, they learned from the master himself back how many years ago, 75 years ago. So it's kind of interesting, though, that the West completely ignores, much like they ignored the data when people would present information about how certain things were being transmitted or not transmitted, how many people it affected. So when you go from one narrative where you're only presenting the state-run media talking points, the little emperor Dr. Fauci, right? That's all we trusted in Fauci. In this case, who are we trusting in? Fox News? I mean, look, the neocons too, they came out of the woodwork. They were quiet for a little while, and then they were all rushing to the microphone to condemn everything, the usual suspects like Mitt Romney, but a lot of other people that you kind of shake your head and you say to yourself, okay, do some research, right? You're a sitting congressperson. Do some research and then come to a conclusion. Don't just blurt out your neoliberal or neoconservative points. But nobody really seems to care to get to the bottom of anything. Now, again, to be really clear, I am not endorsing what Putin is doing. I'm not saying war is a good idea, but something, see, this is, again, the lack of intellectual curiosity. Something pushed Putin to this point. Now, some on the right will say, well, Biden is a weak leader. Okay, and that's part of it. And Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was really poorly done. And that's true. And Putin is probably looking at this saying, these guys are not ready for prime time. They're not ready for anything. And the country that I'm going to get into here is being run by a guy who was a television comedian before he became the president of the country. And the more research you do, you realize that there was a lot of chaos and turmoil in Donbass, and most of it came from Kiev and places in Ukraine that were part of this so-called neo-Nazi faction. Now, again, Putin's words, and you could take them for what they're worth. He said he wanted to denazify the region. That was his goal. And I don't know if you provoke a conflict. I don't think that's a good idea, because I think this war, even though I think it's going to be short-lived, and I think there's going to be a resolution soon, that would be my guess. Maybe there won't be. Maybe this will drag on for a while. I think it would be stupid for those in leadership positions in Ukraine. They all become like Baghdad Bob at a certain point. It's just like, just stop, okay? We know that you're getting crushed, and this is easy for Russia. This was easy to do. And that's why I think a lot of people are kind of throwing their hands up and going, just get out of their way. And hopefully they'll stop soon. And I think rather than throwing sanctions on them, rather than the banking situation, the SWIFT system, which apparently would cause all kinds of global chaos, they've got oil that's supposed to go both to Germany and here to the United States. Because remember, in the old days, like what was that, 2020, when we had our own energy? And I get it. For those of you who are Greens, right, who are like looking for environmental solutions to these problems, they're not there yet. Because otherwise, other countries that had high-tech advanced, whatever, software, or like China, for instance, they have a lot of very smart people in China. I think they could have invented something. But what are they doing? They're burning coal. They're burning lots of coal. And so if they don't sign on to a treaty like India, China, and, for a brief time, the United States had gotten out of the Paris Accords, but we get back into it. And that means what? We can't produce our own energy. And we do it for political reasons, because it looks like we're pulling back from the fossil fuels, but that's actually not really happening. We're just using someone else's energy. And in this case, it's Russia. And guess what? Prices are going to go through the roof if they're cut off. And this is what I mean by, the elites and the oligarchs. What they do is they put out all this kind of talking point BS. It doesn't affect them. They have a fortune. They don't have to worry about paying $4 or $5 a gallon for gas. All of this stuff is going to affect the markets. And again, for those who had insight to this, or probably start to maybe pull back on their investments. But like I say, if this becomes a war where the United States has to do peacekeeping missions and nation building missions and so forth, it's still going to be a boon to the war industry. And because this is what we do. And then we occupy and we set up camp there and we never leave. So right now, everybody's saying, oh no, this is the worst thing ever. Putin is a tyrant. He's a dictator. He's out of control. Here's what I know about Putin is I think he likes his own country. I think he likes his own citizens. I think he wants to protect certain beliefs that he has that the rest of the world is just casting aside. And he doesn't want to be a part of that. And China doesn't want to be a part of that either. As much as I know they are a communist regime, I think China would just prefer to be, left alone, right? To their own, in some cases, really bad devices. And they are violating human rights all the time. But the problem I have with all of this is that it sucks the lifeblood and energy out of this country. And typically the people who bear the brunt of it are what some would call the deplorables or those fringe minorities with extreme viewpoints, right? We're just going to go off the Justin Trudeau. That should be the new meme. It's more updated and it's a little fancier than deplorables, but I think you know where I'm going with this. It's like all of the working class people, including, by the way, all of these immigrants that are flowing into this country, the ones who want to go to work and maybe bypass some of the BS in order to assimilate. I wish they would still go through some kind of process and make sure we're not importing terrorists. And half of these people are coming over are part of human trafficking. You've got coyotes out there, then you've got fentanyl pouring over. You've got the cartels doing all of these horrible things to people and then corrupting the country that they're bringing these people to even more at a time where we really don't need any more of it. So my view on Putin, is he a bad dude? Yeah, he's always been a bad dude, but he was in check. And I'm not giving Trump a lot of credit, but he obviously didn't feel the need to act up under Trump. Something else triggered that and perpetuated that and green lighted that. And it's easy just to blame Biden and whoever's handling Biden. That's who I blame. Our foreign policy for decades certainly has made this even more of a thing because what we like to do is build military facilities all around the world. We never pull back. We never close them down. We never say, you know what, that World War II thing, that happened a long time ago. It might be, time to reevaluate if we should have military people on, for instance, like the DMZ or something, but we don't do that. We just keep deploying more and more soldiers all over the world. And we're supposed to be the world's police. I think we would solve our money problems by doing two things: abolish the Federal Reserve and cut the military industrial complex in half. That's all I'd propose. Cut it in half. Oh no, how can we be ready? Switzerland, armed but neutral, ready if we need to do anything, protect our own sovereignty, our own borders, maybe help an ally here or there, but in that hemisphere, let someone else do it. Just let Europe deal with it. They're all hyper over there about NATO and Russia being this rogue nation. Well, let them throw the sanctions down. Let them do all the dirty work. I know they are. There are countries over there that are just like out of their mind because their military mites and like dust mites compared to the Russians. So this is interesting. I think it's going to end, and a lot of people think it's going to go nuclear. I don't think it's going to go nuclear. It would be crazy. The only way this goes nuclear is if people continue to kind of push at this bear and poke it more, where it just goes, you know what, guys, obviously you're not listening to us. And that's the claim that, like Sergei Lavrov and some of the other people in Russia, I've watched them speak through a translator. And it seems as though their argument is, we've been telling you guys for 8 years that this is a problem and nobody wanted to listen. Now you're listening, right? Maybe that's what they're saying. Now you're finally listening. Let's just hope that people don't lose their lives needlessly in this conflict. I got word from a couple of different sources that Russian soldiers were dying at a fairly high rate because of the type of missions that they are doing, where it's a very high risk situation. And, they're kind of all hyped and ready to go. And quite honestly, it's sad that they have to use their military to do this, because this, again, doesn't involve any sort of conflict where somebody was attacking Russia. Now, the way they try to portray it is, this region of Ukraine, it's as if, they're being attacked on a daily basis and Russia had to go in there and stop these neo-Nazi types. It's a fairly compelling argument. Is it propaganda? I'm still doing research. The jury's not out. I'm still working through it. And if I get more intel, I know people who've commented on these videos, they've got different perspectives. They think I'm one guy said I was a traitor. All right. One guy who was following me said I was a traitor because I believe some of what Putin was saying, or, I look at geopolitics and I say, why are we getting involved in this? That's the number one thing. Why are we involved in this? And we're not too involved in it other than trying to pull the plug on their finances and their banking capability. But we need their oil. It's sad, but we need their oil. They don't produce a lot of oil. And that shows you how bad our situation is, that we're getting oil from Russia. And of course, we get a ton from Saudi Arabia. And of course, we would go to bat for Saudi Arabia if anything happened to them. And of course, we look the other way, right, in the whole conflict with Yemen. And we always get our nose in the business of Syria, right? Because supposedly Syria and Russia and all that stuff, and we fight a proxy war. We are very hypocritical and duplicitous. And if you're a libertarian on foreign policy, you just shake your head and you say to yourself, see, this is what's happening, because we have this constant sort of neoliberal, neoconservative, interventionalist foreign policy. And now it's coming back to bite us in the butt. And we'll see how this plays out. I'm hoping that Putin does what he needs to do, and this ends in a ceasefire and they negotiate, and, the land is given to whoever it's supposed to be given to. And I think at that point, it's over. I don't think the world is going to let Putin off the hook that easily. And the news media now has, like I say, they've got a narrative going forward, and they could say, see, we told you so. Putin and Russia, that's the thing they have to talk about. Well, Putin and Russia got loose during Biden's administration, and Trump didn't have that problem, right? Nobody had that problem really up until Biden. Putin's been in there since late 90s, I think. Bush had to deal with them. Of course, Bush was preoccupied with, going into other countries and bombing them, and doing that supposedly with the approval of Congress and with these NATO alliances. The problem was that was very unjustified, and there was no danger from these countries, this weapons of mass destruction. Maybe the weapons, they hid them in Ukraine. They probably should look in the Ukraine for the weapons, the WMDs, because maybe they're right there, right? Could just send some troops in to look for them. Just like OJ is still looking for the real killer, we've got to figure that these weapons, we need to still find them. And there's a good chance they're in the Ukraine, because some of the stuff they're using is like from the 1950s. So war sucks, people. Just remember, this isn't a good thing. And the economic repercussions are going to hurt everyday, hardworking Americans. And the oligarchs, they don't care. They don't care. This is just some kind of a chess game, shell game for them. But you really need to care about foreign policy. Tulsi Gabbard, during one of her speeches, she said, you know, foreign policy is domestic policy. And at the time, I was trying to make the link work. Now I understand what she meant. And a lot of people just don't even care. And I understand that side of it too, because most Americans just want to go to work and be left alone. And this constant barrage of information about stuff that's happening halfway around the world, most people could care less. And I don't really blame them for that, because, you know, life is short and you have to prioritize. All right, people, done with this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications on new videos. And yes, you can support me over on Patreon for like $1 a month if you choose to do that. It's much appreciated. Just tell me over there if you sign up that you're a viewer on this channel versus my music channel. I guess it really doesn't matter, because they're both pretty similar in the way they've been branded. But I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you soon.